Welcome to our Rainbow Covenant studio. It seems like it's been a long time since we have been here and broadcast a show continuing our report on Appalling Twistianity, but it's important that we get back to this topic. It is one of the great mysteries, really, in human de-evolution, that the most popular religions are the dumbest, that they are the most counter to what God actually said and intended for us. And of course, I speak of Christianity and Islam. I've written 5 books on the Quran, the most comprehensive assessment ever written of the Quran. I actually take the Quran, I put it in chronological order, set it into the context of Muhammad's perverted life using the 4 most credible hadith sources, and prove emphatically that the Quran is the most immoral, duplicitous, plagiarized, worthless, deadliest book ever written. And yet, there are 2 billion Muslims who believe in a spirit that is too dumb to have even been perceived as a demon. I mean, you would expect more from a demon than you get from Allah. And so it is just astounding that there can be 2 billion Muslims as utterly foolish as the Quran actually is. And you want proof that 5 volumes of Goddamn Religion are free at goddamnreligion.org or at yadayah.com. But that doesn't exonerate Christianity. Just because Christianity isn't the dumbest, deadliest religion ever conceived, it is nonetheless obviously false. It was conceived by Paul beginning in 52 CE through his death in 66 CE, and then championed by 2 of his loyalists, Mark and Luke. And between the 14 books attributed to Paul and then the 3 attributed to Mark and Luke, including the book of Acts, the entire religion is a fabrication of Paul's hatred for Yahowah, for his people, and for Dowd being the actual Messiah and Son of God. There was no Jesus. The entire myth was formulated between 20 and 40 years after the fact by copying, stealing really, identity theft, creating a counterfeit of the actual Messiah, Son of God, and King David, who in his second of 3 lives did precisely what he said he was going to do, when he said he was going to do it, and even why he would do so, allowing the Romans to crucify him in fulfilling Passover, and then taking our religious guilt into Sheol on Matzah so that we could be part of the covenant family on Bikurim. And he told us exactly to the day when he would fulfill Chag Matzah. He told us exactly how he would endure crucifixion between 600 and 1,000 years before he volunteered to do these things for us. And yet there is a religion that exists by denying that it was Dowd who did them, even though he wrote about them in first person, and has replaced him with a complete fabrication. Jesus Christ never existed. And if Jesus Christ was just a myth, the likes of Pinocchio and the Easter Bunny and Santa Claus, I really wouldn't care. But unfortunately, the rubbish regarding Jesus was designed to counterfeit the truth regarding the actual Messiah and Son of God, Dowd David, who is our Savior. And so for that reason, I care. You might be surprised that the person who was able to identify the fact that Dode is our Savior, that he is the actual Messiah and Son of God according to God, and the one who fulfilled Pesach Matzon Bakurim in 33 CE, proving that Jesus never existed. You think that the person who would determine these two things, as well as ascertain the timeline so that you can now know exactly when the harvests are going to occur, when the time of trouble begins for Israel and the world, and when the sacrifice of the red heifer will transpire to purge the adulterous woman that is Yisrael, so that she is prepared to be betrothed to her returning king, David, and what day that's going to transpire, and with whom he will return, so that we can all return to Gan Eden on Sukkah. I've presented it all for you, presented the events and the dates between now and this time, which is just 8 years from now, along with every important act that will occur along the way. I have even been the first to successfully identify and prove the identity of the person that Christians expect, known as the Antichrist. Yes, he's already here, fully demon-possessed and engaged, doing exactly what we were told in Daniel and in Ezekiel and in Isaiah would unfold before our eyes, watching as Israel is betrayed. And so I come to you with a wealth of insights. I've been able over these past 24 years to deduce tens of thousands of them, more than anyone who has ever lived. And yet it's only 1 in a million that pay attention. And that's a shame, because while the world is looking for this creature known as the Antichrist, and I'm the first to identify him, what the world should have been looking for is the identity of the Nachri as delivered by Solomon during the actual Sermon on the Mount, and also of this Choter, who is the person delineated by Isaiah that gets more attention from Isaiah than anyone else, unique among all humans, and that the Choter is imbued with the 7 spirits of Yahowah, unlike anyone else who has ever lived. And have you ever heard a pastor or a priest, an imam, a rabbi,
No.
ever speak of?
No, they ought to be going, who is this guy? Because between the Nakar and the Choter and the man from Edom, you ought to be at least asking yourself that question.
Absolutely, because the man from Edom, according to Isaiah, who is not only a great prophet, but the most proven of the prophets, the prophet through of whom we have the entire great Isaiah scroll, he devotes the 63rd chapter to this man from Edom and celebrates him as the one who saves a great many of his people. And the Nakar and Nachri is the one that Yahweh inspired Solomon to say was the one that his people at this time needed to listen to and act upon if they were seeking redemption. And of course, the Choter is unlike anyone, and that he not only garners an entire chapter in Yeshayah, the great prophet, but also is imbued with the 7 spirits of Yahweh. So we're going to begin where we left off on our last program and reviewing what is said about the Choter, because there's only one person in all of human history that meets the qualifications that are delineated in this text. It says, then a Choter, a shoot, a stem off the main branch, a sucker from the fallen rootstock, will be extended for this time by means of the stalk, the stump, the root, which can offer new growth of Yishe, of one to stand out and be noticed, of the very person who gave Dowd, our Messiah, life. As an observant branch, as a netzer, which is akin to a nakar. In fact, it's a blend of nakri and choder into a singular concept as an observant branch. It's from natsar, meaning to observe, watch over, and preserve, to closely look after, focus upon, and project your attention to, by means of his roots, and that which keeps him anchored, steadfast, and nourished. Shereshu, his base, his foundation, such that he will continually bear an abundance of fruit, being exceedingly productive as the bull, as the parah. Par in Hebrew is bull, parah is a productive bull, and you should also recognize this when Yashaya tells you that the choder is the parah. That should have sent up lights and flares and whistles and drawn your attention to this, such that you would be in a position to know who the choder actually is. Do you know who the parah is? Because Yeshaya, Isaiah, will tell you in his 17th chapter that the one who is the final Zoroah, cultivating the two final harvests, Shabuah and Towrah, is a parah, and that it is his role as the parah that will be fulfilled during Towrah, because then he will be the most productive of all bulls. Do you know the story that is told in Numbers 19? Do you know how the story in Numbers 19 equates to the seminal event in Elijah's life? The whole reason that Elijah was chosen and brought to Shamaim was because he was rehearsed on exposing and condemning the religiosity and the politics of Israel. 2,888 years ago, while roasting a bull. And that is why he was chosen by God, brought into Shamaim, and will return as one of the two witnesses, because he is the master of ceremonies over the sacrifice and subsequent roasting of the parah, of this productive bull. Why didn't you make those connections between Elijah being the final witness and this seminal moment, the single most important moment in his life, the entire reason that Yahweh took him then and is bringing him back in a matter of 4 years? Why are you unable to make that connection between that bull and this one? And then between the parah of Numbers 19. People are fussing all over a red cow as if the Adamah parah was a red heifer. No, it's just like when Dowd fulfilled Pesach as the very Lamb of God. He didn't turn into a furry animal. This choder is a man. As the parah, he is still a man who is symbolized by a bull who is productive. It is the Adamah parah of Numbers 19 that perfects and prepares the adulterous woman of Numbers 5, where the groom who wants his bride back is King Dowd, and where the priest who is performing all of this is Elijah, such that the religiously filthy woman who is purged of her guilt so that she can be wed to the returning king, the groom in this story, is religious Israel. Well, Israel apart from religion. These connections are the essence of the story. Without being able to make these connections, you have no hope of identifying who this individual is or the role that this individual is playing, or how he will work with the others in God's story, and in particular, David, the returning king, and Elijah, as the man most suited to condemn the religiosity and politics of Israel, while serving as the master of ceremonies over the roasting of a sacrificial bull. That's a lot to garner from Yeshaya, Isaiah 11:1. And why am I, after 2,700 years, the first person to explain this to you so that you could understand it? And why now, with it being available to you, are you not going to have it transform your life, your perspective on Yahowah? If you are Jewish, why doesn't this send shivers down your spine so that you walk away from religion? If you're a Christian, and I'm sharing this with you in a program called Twistianity, why doesn't it tell you that the entire myth of Jesus is nothing but a fraud to draw your attention away from the actual Messiah and Son of God, our returning King, David? You don't have much time to get your act together, and the message couldn't be any clearer. What follows is said of one man in all of human history. This never happened before, and it will never happen again. That makes the Towrah the most extraordinary human who has ever lived from the point of view of conveying God's message. Now, he is not in the league of his king. His king, Dode, is the greater light, and he is the lesser light reflecting the king's brilliance. But because no one heretofore has been able to lead Israelites to the truth, God is going all in with the Towrah. He has never done this before. He will never do it again. And the reason is simple. Because even he failed with the children of Israel, as did Moshe, as did Dode. All three gave up on you. All three came to the conclusion that Jews are impossible to lead, to instruct, to teach. Oh, they're easy to misguide, all right. Look what the rabbis have done to you. Look what Christianity has done to you. Look what Islam has done to you. Look what even Marxism has done to you. They're easy to vilify. They're easy to mislead. But to tell a Jew the truth and to have the Jew accept the truth and go against the lie of religion, of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Marxism, and to stand with Yahowah, oh man, God himself failed. You told God to shut up and go away, that you never wanted to hear from him or see him again. You haven't changed. You rebelled against King Dode. Moshe, in the beginning of the Exodus, turned to God and said, "How dare you do this to me? I told you I didn't want this job. I told you these people were impossible. Now they have proven that they're so obnoxious that no one can reason with them. I want out of this responsibility. As a matter of fact, I am so disgusted in this place you have put me, trying to lead these impossible people. I want you to kill me." And you say, "Oh, we're Torah observant." That's what the Torah says. Now, the only hope you have at this point is that the voice of this Towrah will resonate with you, as this Towrah is inspired by the very Spirit of Yahowah, the God whose name you erased from his testimony and from your lives, whom you disgustingly, revoltingly refer to now as Hashem. His name is Yahowah. This is because the Spirit, the Ruach of Yahowah, will settle and remain on him. Ruach, Nuach, al-Hu. So, Ruach, Yahowah, Nuach, al-Hu. Settle and remain. Placed upon and energizes him, restores him, is an alliance with him, dwells within him, resides as part of him, and will never depart him. She enriches the association and assures the most favorable outcome for him. There's no one else throughout the Torah and prophets that we are told that the Spirit of Yahowah comes upon. So if you are a God-forsaken rabbi, why is it your head is so far up your tuchus that you're not trying to figure out who this person is? And when this person finally addresses you and says, it's obvious, pay attention, do you not? This is how disgusting the rabbis have become. The very Spirit of Yahowah has come upon and resides within the choder. But that's not the end of it. That should be enough, but it's not the end of it. Doesn't get better than that, but that's not the end of it. You see, the choder has some 10,000 insights into God's nature and what he intends and is offering to us and expecting in return. Some 9,900 more than the collective brain thrust of the rabbis have been able to perceive in the past 2,000 years. And this is because Yahowah also offered him the spirit of Chokmah. Rabbis want to pretend that they're wise, and yet collectively, they don't know 1/100000th of what the choder knows. It's the spirit of providing the capacity to comprehend, the mental aptitude, and the wisdom to understand. Chokmah, it's mental aptitude. The Chokmah's ability to process information is vastly superior to anyone else when it comes to the most important subject in the universe, knowing Yahowah. He has the spirit of Chokmah in addition to the spirit of Yahowah. And this enables Benah, understanding, making the connections to reveal profoundly important insights. Now, that alone should have been enough to have everyone on earth seeking this individual. The man who is a choder, a stem off the main branch, a sucker from the fallen rootstock of Yisrael that stands out and takes notice, that is rooted in the truth that Yahowah has conveyed, that is in fact bullish, a parah. This man who will serve as the productive bull in fulfilling Towrah, who uniquely is the beneficiary of the spirit of Yahowah, the spirit of Chokmah, and the Ruach of Ben and Benah, of intelligence, of understanding, and of Yahowah's very nature. Speaking for Yahowah. But that's not all that God had to say. It would be vastly more than enough just to introduce the choder and say that the choder is this productive bull, and that the choder is the stem from the main branch that is Dod, and that comes from the fallen rootstock that was Yisrael. as this productive bull would have been enough by itself to make him the most important person of this time. But then for God to add to it that this person is imbued with, and the spirit of Yahowah resides within him, in addition to the spirit of Chakma, of intelligence, and the spirit of Bien, understanding, puts him in a league unlike any other. No one in all of human history can make those claims. But he also has the Ruach, the spirit of Etzah. Etzah is the ability to understand and perceive the entire portrait that God has painted from beginning to end, and then to be able to convey what he has learned in a manner that can provide counsel, effective mentoring, and advice to those who are open to it. He has the spirit of advice and counsel, of proper consultation and mentoring on the picture that God has painted for us from beginning to end, from making sense of the Big Bang and creation as God lays it out, and the flood, to appreciating what happened in the Garden of Great Joy of Eden and how we're returning to it, and how that flood in between had meaning. Can tell us exactly what we need to know about God's nature, what he cares for and what he disavows, and what we will expect from him as we return to Eden, and what will never be there again, religion or politics. The spirit of advice and counsel. But to do that job, when the greats, Moshe and Dod, failed, when the people were so belligerent they told God himself to shut up and go away, well, he's going to have, in addition to the spirit of Yahowah, in addition to the spirit of intelligence, in addition to the spirit of understanding, in addition to the spirit of understanding, appreciating the entire portrait that God has painted from beginning to end, and have the ability to share it with you and provide advice and counsel to you, well, he is going to have to be the Gabor of Gabor, a man who is emboldened, who is inspiring, who is a man of strong character and conscience, who is courageous, who is able to accomplish this mission, and who has the resolute resolve to see it through. As a matter of fact, just finished translating the end of Daniel 9, which is really the sum total of the book prior to the 12th chapter. The 9th and the 10th and 11th chapters really don't add a lot to the story. It's the 7th, the 8th, the 9th, and the 12th that tell the tale. That's when Dod, David, and Gabriel, who is how presented as the prophet in that story, Michael, who is Dod's associate, and Elia, who is a partner with Michael, are the people telling that story. And at the end of the 9th chapter, with Dod's visit as Gabriel, one of the things that he points out is that not only will the prince to the king, which is the role this Towrah is playing, prevail, that he will see it through, and that he will allow himself as the final act to be bludgeoned by the corporeal manifestation of Satan in the end, to preserve this mortal remnant of Yisrael, that he indeed will have the courage to deliver, to see it right through to the end, the resolve to do this job. And Dod, as a prophet, has seen the future. He knows it's true. It's why Yahweh gave his choter, Giborah. Now, you don't typically meet many timid bulls. And the man that is being described is a parah. He is a bull. You don't very often have people that can be blown over if they're deeply rooted, and the Towrah is deeply rooted. Yahweh has never been one to give up. And this individual has the Spirit of Yahweh within him. But as the Spirit of Yahweh within him, he must manifest the same level of courage and character, boldness that was apparent in Dod. Dod is the most Gabor of all Yahweh's chosen implements. As a matter of fact, when Yahweh speaks of the son who was given, of Dod, who he calls out by name, in the 9th chapter of Yeshayah, he specifically refers to him as Gabor. And it is the title that explains who Gabriel is, Gabriel, in the meetings with Daniel, because it means the most Gabor of El, the most courageous and capable man of God. Again, it's Daniel. Daniel is knowing that this individual is Dod David. So throughout the book of Daniel, when we are introduced to Gabriel, we're listening to Dod David. But in this regard, the Towrah does not take a second position to Dod. He is as Dod as they come in terms of being emboldened, inspiring, courageous, a man of character who will fight to the end, who will never give up, who has the resolute commitment to see the job through. And that's a pretty extraordinary list of 7 attributes that Yahweh is providing the Towrah with. But in addition to that, this man has the Ruach of Death. The Ruach of Death means he has a wide base of knowledge. And, when Yahweh chose me for this job, I came to the job with a wide base of knowledge. I came to the job having traveled in 175 countries. There's not a lot of people like that who've seen the world, know what it's like outside of their own little neighborhood. As a person who knew the most powerful and influential religious figures of the day and had rejected them. Not many people like that. As someone who had met with at gunpoint, I wasn't holding the guns, they were held against me, by Islamic jihadists, Hamas, Hezbollah, Islamic Jihad, and Al-Qaeda, all holding guns to my head as I sought to understand what happened on 9/11. And there aren't many people who have the knowledge base that I have on Islam. In fact, I would dare say there is no one who understands the Quran, Hadith, Allah, Muhammad, and Islam better than I do anywhere in the world, having written the 8 books on Islam, including the 5 volumes of Goddamn Religion. There is no one on this planet that understands how Paul created Christianity and the myth of Christ better than I do. No one, not even close. So this knowledge base of Dayath is important. There's no one who understands and has the knowledge base on the book of Ezekiel, for example, that knows it's Satan's autobiography, that it wasn't scribed by Yahweh. It thrives in 25 sadistic ways to kill Jews. And it features 2 horrific rape scenes. The book of Ezekiel and its presentation of the monstrosity of the temple and this copper orangey colored bronze man who is the real estate developer in the end for the naming rights of what would be a gargantuan structure to be pave over all of the Temple Mount in Jerusalem as a shrine to Satan is no one less than Donald J. Trump. No one understands the book better than I do, knows it better than I do. And this is not by accident. Or knows the nature of business and economics. It's a wide cross-section of things that you need to have an appreciation of, to know, understand what's happening to God's people, how they're being fooled by Judaism and fooled by their political leaders. So I've met enough of them at the highest echelons of government to know who they are. Somebody was commenting when I equated the gaudy nature of what is now the Oval Office, as we see it gold-leafed now. And I commented and said, it's, Trump has made it into his own image. And they said, yeah. And you would know, right? Because you've been there? Oh, yeah, I have been there. Lots and lots of times I have been there. Sorry, pal. You pulled out the ad hominem card when ad hominem actually knew what he was talking about. And it's over and over and over again. Been there. I've done that. I have the spirit of knowing and of knowledge that you're able to transform, having the spirit of chakma, intelligence, and the spirit of bien, understanding, so that you have the spirit of etzah, being able to put the entire picture together and share it with you, and the spirit of Gabora to have the boldness to do so when the whole world either yawns or spits in your face, when everyone who has tried to do this previously has been run off, condemned, and there are not a lot of people who have tried. Of course, Dayat is from Yada, which is the name that precedes Yahweh's in all of the books that I have written. Precedes it as a verb, to know Yahweh, and as a proper noun, to be Yada, with Yahweh. But there are 7 spirits of Yahweh. It's always 6 plus 1. The spirit of Yahweh is the one, and there's 6 that follow. And the 6th and final spirit that has been offered to the Towrah that makes him unique among all humans is the spirit of Yara. The spirit of Yara. So why do you think that Yahweh would give the Towrah the spirit of Yahweh, or that it would be listed last among these things? Because they're listed in the order of their importance, from most important to least important. Yeah, the most important is the spirit of Yahweh. Then the spirit of intelligence, because Yahweh doesn't work with dummies. If you're going to serve Yahweh, if you're going to share Yahweh's message, if you're going to come to understand Yahweh, the first and foremost thing that you must have is the same thing that made Moshe and Dod and Yirmiyah and Yashayah extraordinary. What was it? They were smart. God just doesn't do stupid. That's why God never mentions faith, never mentions belief. Stupid can do faith and belief. Stupid can do politics, does it all the time. But to actually understand who God is and what he's offering requires intelligence. God chooses intelligent people. That's why after Yahweh's spirit, the next thing on the list was the spirit of intelligence. And the next is the word that I have always treasured among all of the words in Hebrew, bien, because bien explains the process of understanding, of making the connections between things, to finding the common denominator, to be able to use the whole concept of probability, to ascertain what things are true and what things are not, as well as cause and effect and what leads from one place to another. That is the means that you build this base so that you understand who God is and what he's offering and what he's disgusted by. And so you have the spirit of Yahweh, the spirit of intelligence, the spirit of understanding, first and foremost. And then God says, I don't want you to miss how important it is for this man to be the first to put the whole picture together, the whole story. Before I even asked him to pick up these microphones and to look into the camera, he had the entire story from beginning to end put together as no one else has in human history. Telling you how life in the garden was so unique, actually writing an entire volume about life in the garden. And then explaining that is what God is taking us back to. It's the purpose of Sukkah as the seventh of the 7 Moed Mikre, and when it will transpire, and why God is going to establish 1,000 years of Sukkah celebration as a return to Eden, of knowing this entire story and the role that Moshe played and Dode played, and now this Choder plays in this story, so as to respect and revere Yahowah, cannot be done in today's world without the 5th of those 7, which is the very spirit of Gabor, of this ability to be courageous and to be steadfast, to be a man of character in a time when God's people have been so recalcitrant, so obnoxious, so damn religious, so political. And you've got to be able to stand up against it. And then build this entire base of knowledge of Dayath, and to recognize that this base of knowledge of Dayath comes with time. That you fill your files with the information that can be used over a lifetime. There's only a couple of people that Yahowah started with when they were young. And Dode and Yirmiah. The rest of us are old guys because it takes a while. You got to have some gray hairs on your chin.
I'm a little slow.
Sticking through your hair. It takes a while to develop the base of knowledge and life experiences so that you can be effectively judgmental. And then that all leads to the final of the 7 spirits, the spirit of Yara. The least important and the most important, all at the same time. Because if you don't respect Yahowah, you don't love and cherish his name, if you don't appreciate the marvelous attributes of his nature, you can't do the damn job. I see Yahowah as awesome. I see his character as superlative. I see him as being astonishingly great, and yet I don't put him on a pedestal. For me, he's my boss, and he's my dad, and he's my friend. And Yahowah would have it no other way. He constantly kids with me. When I come to him and I say, I'm stumped on this one. I've done my best. I don't know how you want me to respond from here. He begins with, okay, young man. Now that we're in this spot, young man. Yes, young man. Now that he can say that. He's, trillions of years older. So young man. And then he will always respond in a way that's clever. When I asked on Towrah what was going to happen with Asher when we're gone, and he just laughed at me and said, so where do you think you're going? Lord, did I know that on Towrah, I was the parah. I'm the bull being sacrificed. Where in the hell do you think you're going? You're not going anywhere on Towrah, pal. That was hilarious. Took me a while to catch up to speed, but nonetheless, it was hilarious. I did my best to get out of having to go back and rewrite Prophet of Doom. That's the only one of the 35 books I had not rewritten. multiple times. And I knew it was dated. I hadn't been in it in a while. I had no idea it was as bad as it was in terms of being dated. But nonetheless, I didn't want to go and to rewrite that again. I was having a ball rewriting the third volume of Coming Home. So I went to YAHOWAH on 10/7, the morning of 10/7. I knew that what I knew about Islam was the only thing that had a chance of saving Israel. Nonetheless, I went to YAHOWAH and said, I really don't want to have to go back there. That was a hellish time writing that. I appreciate we worked effectively together, and you protected me just as you promised, but I don't want to go do that. Do I have to go do that, Dad? Immediately. I've taken care of you. Now you take care of my people. You've seen my home here in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. Rich lives in my home in the middle of the Caribbean Sea. You've seen the elegance and the intelligence, elegance and intelligence of my wife. You've seen how I have these two charming fur faces, and I look up every morning at the sun rising over the mountains to the east and the beautiful sunsets and the long streaking of the sun in the west. We'll do another show this evening from our ocean studio with the gleaming blue Caribbean, and how we've created this little oasis for ourselves in the middle of the sea, and have found this place where we could focus on writing and now sharing with you. Who else has a room like this one that we had created for ourselves? It was our spa, and it has this wonderful barber's chair that Rich is now using as his chair, where I got my special haircuts from my beautiful wife, and there is a fully articulating table with all of the good features and equipment sitting behind me as part of our spa. It was a room to celebrate, our relationship together, and now it's a studio. But who had a studio with a wall that changes in rainbow colors, already ready to be used in this kind of way? Who had a patio that overlooked the sea that could be turned into an ocean studio? Who had transformed a room that he turned into his library so that he could write all of these books for you and offer them, and then could use that library and say, okay, God says we're not going to be writing a whole lot more anymore. We're going to be doing a lot more speaking. Just transform their home into a studio and invite you inside. And then after we have the hang of it, and Rich could turn and manage the controls, was able to convince Leah to be part of it and to reach out in this way. God says, I've taken care of you. Now you take care of my people. Oh, but God, but okay, you did, but your people are really impossible, sir. Are you aware of that? Yeah, I've dealt with them I had dealt with them. I'm now not dealing with them. It's your job now to deal with them. Take care of them. I've given you all the resources to do so. It's pretty extraordinary, isn't it? Nothing like it ever. No. Not in all of human history.
But, the spirit of Yara is literally how you teach us to understand. You helped connect the dots that nobody else has done.
Because I respect the words of YAHOWAH as if they were treasures, fine jewels to be examined from every possible side. And I know that everything that he has conveyed to us has an opportunity to teach, to enlighten, to inspire, to enrich, to embolden, to add to life. That is a tool to wield against religion and politics and in favor of God's great devotion and love for the covenant relationship. And I have, more than anyone in human history, come to love YAHOWAH's name. Who is the one person who, after 2,500 years, finally said, I get it. It's YAHOWAH. And let me prove why I know that it is YAHOWAH. And let's now write all of these books and under the name of Yada Yahowah, to know Yahweh, and to start this blog unlike any other. And the world of social media devoted to Yahweh. Yes, I love Yahweh's name. I know Yahweh. And I know how he loves his name. And I know how his son loved his name. And I know how every covenant member loves his name. And it is only when his people embrace his name again and stop that goddamn forsaken stupidity of Hashem and G-D that there will be peace in the family again. Additionally, by accepting the offer and responding appropriately, this choder will be perceptive. He will be ra'ak. See, God said, I'm giving him the 7 spirits, and it's going to lead to this, ra'ak. As a result of this, by accepting the offer, and by the way, it was an offer. Yahweh came to me and said, hey, kid, I want you to do something for me. He didn't say kid at the time, but I didn't have any idea. I didn't even know what his name was when he approached me. But I had walked away from religion, so I was prepared. I had walked away from politics. I was at least available. And when he came to me and said, I want you to do this for me, I had the opportunity to tell him no. It was under the auspices of free will. Now, he cheats. I mean, he wasn't going to take no from Moshe. There wasn't another option. And, you know, an 8-year-old boy is not going to turn God down. So, you know, there you go with Dode. And in my case, he knew I was going to negotiate with him. He knew I was going to be a patsy for this anyway. It just was in my nature to say, all right, this is a big, bold opportunity. But he put the answer to the questions that I asked in my pocket. So, I mean, okay, how are you going to argue with that? But I did accept. Glad I did.
He's known you for a very long time.
Well, the fact is, it's true that we have known each other for much longer than the 25 years that we have been together on this project, or 24 years that we've been together on this project. You read yourself in stories like when Moshe gave up, Dode and I were the answer. You read that and say, wow, okay. So he's known about what we're going to do for a long, long time. And then you read about Dode as Gabriel going to meet with Daniel, who was a bit of a jerk. I don't like Daniel very much. Dode didn't like him very much either. But he could write, and the timing was right. So he became the right person for us to meet with. But it's Dode and Michael and Gabriel Dode and Michael, who is Yada. He's this choder that meet with him. And they're sitting there listening to yourself provide an explanation of the prophecy and flesh out the prophecy 2,600 years ago. You don't think that's freaky? And it's pretty weird, but yeah, we've known each other. We've known each other a very, very, very long time. Well, not very long from God's point of view. That's why it's still a young man. But God does not deal with time the way we do. And if it freaks you out, and it did me for a bit there, to know that God can deal with somebody before they're born, well, sorry to tell you, but I'm happy to tell you that God uses time as a dimension, just like we walk forward and back and can jump up and down. Time is a dimension. And Yahweh is able to maneuver in it. That's how prophecy works, by the way. Prophecy is God's not saying this is what you're going to do, that this is how everything comes to an end. And no, what he is saying is that he has seen the future and reported our future to us and our past, writing it down so that we could trust him. But anyways, he's saying that all of this leads to this choder accepting the offer and responding appropriately. And Rich, in this whole deal, the one thing I can say, okay, kid, you did okay. When the offer was made, I don't think God could have found anyone who was more willing to devote the rest of his life to it. I have given this my all. I wake up doing this. I go to bed doing this. I do take a few hours off each week, and occasionally, we'll take time even off for meals and not have the meal served at the desk. But to the extent a human can be devoted to a mission, I am. In fact, if I were any more devoted, I think I would collapse. I think it would be too overwhelming.
Thank you for accepting the offer.
Yeah, that's what I did. I accepted the offer. I accepted this offer as enthusiastically and as completely, I think, as a human can. And it's worked out beautifully between the two of us, but it was an offer, and it intrigued me. There is no doubt about it. There was aspects of my nature that were immediately intrigued by this, and come to find out that there are aspects, attributes, if you will, and attitudes that Yahweh really likes working with. And that's not to say I'm perfect. I'm far from it. But that's part of the equation. There are attributes and attitudes that Yahweh likes working through. And the fact of the matter, if he didn't, then what? Because his people told him to shut up and go away. They didn't want to ever see him or hear from him again. So until they change their attitude, he can't speak to them or even through them. So, he was left with the likes of people like me. And he found one that he likes, that had enough success and failure in life, enough exposure to the world, that it would suit his purposes. And then he took it from there. So additionally, by accepting the offer and responding appropriately, he will be perceptive. Look, his acceptance and perceptiveness, his nose for the truth, his willingness to respond and supply the answers after his virtual meeting will be pleasing, bringing him in very close proximity with regard to the development of a profound admiration and respect for Yahweh. Here's Yirah again. So Yirah was the last of the 7, and now here is Yirah for good measure is 8. You know what 8 represents with Yahweh? Infinity, forevermore. And so what is the thing that is being emphasized that will be forevermore? Yara, Yahweh, to respect and revere Yahweh. And that is really what it's all leading. God doesn't want us to worship him. He doesn't want us to pray to him. He doesn't want us to bow down to him. He doesn't want us to blabber to him, but he does want us to respect him. And all of the things that the choder is offering begin where this ends, with the respect for Yahweh. But you don't get to respect Yahweh until you've applied your ability to think, intelligence, and you've made the necessary connections to understand. And then you've put the entire story together from beginning to end so that the picture is framed and it's clear and you're looking at it from the proper perspective. And so that you have this imbued confidence that comes from knowing the truth and understanding what's real about God, such that you are imbued with great and comprehensive knowledge, and how that is empowering, and then ultimately coming to respect Yahweh. That's how it leads to Yahweh. And so we do it, yes, for him. He wants to reconcile his relationship with his people. They're obnoxious. My job is to deal with the obnoxious people until they stop being obnoxious. Moshe didn't, although after he and Yahweh had this little chat, he managed to say, all right, now that you've explained that you have a plan going forward with Eldod and my Dod, I'll get them to the finish line. We'll do this together. And clearly, Dod made the decision, listen, they've worn me down in this first life, but I'll come back and I'll do what's necessary to fulfill Pesach, Matzah, and Bakodim. And then we'll be in a position to lead them as king. I'll follow through. I'm your guy. I'll make this happen. And ultimately now, here we are with the Choder, developing a profound respect for Yahweh. Now, from this point, God's going to tell us exactly how he was going to educate the Choder, recognizing that he has all of these unique spiritual gifts from Yahweh, how he's going to augment the Choder's understanding. And I think this is probably a good place for us to break, and we'll come back. We won't have so much time between programs here, so I don't have to go back to the beginning. But I can't go forward and explaining to you how Yahweh was able to cause me to be the first person to recognize that Jesus never existed, and that he's nothing but a crude counterfeit of Dod to David, and what Yahweh was able to achieve through Dod. I can't set that up so that you have the confidence to trust me and my analysis of it without introducing to you the reason I was able to do it. And this is the reason I was able to do this and perceive so many things more. And until you have an appreciation that that's who I am, you're really not in a place to go forward with this information. And so that's why I'm glad we came back to this. We will return to it, and we'll continue with Yeshaya 11, Isaiah 11, because for our time, it's about as important as anything that you can process. So I thank you for listening. It's been a delight to be back in our Rainbow Covenant studio. I thank you, Rich, for making this possible. We will speak to you at least once more, probably twice more today. My anticipation, my lovely wife is taking one of her 4 times a year. She has medical treatments in Florida. She left this morning to go to Florida. She'll be back on Thursdays. So here it's just the fur faces, Rich and I, which are also four fur faces here, and in our home in the midst of the sea. So we've got really nothing else to do, pal, other than Yahowah blog. So I would expect that we'll have one in the library studio and one around sunset time in our ocean studio today. So I look forward to seeing you again. And then we'll be back down here tomorrow to continue with our series on Appalling Twistianity. Thank you for listening. Look forward to being with you later today.